Well, first of all, welcome to Google Campus and to our event this evening. We are so glad that you have come out to join us. And I can't believe so many people are here as well. Thank you so, so much. Now, my name is Valentina. Some of you know me. I can see some familiar faces in the audience and also some new faces, so welcome. I'm going to be the host of this evening's event, and I can tell you we have a jam-packed event for you tonight. We're going to have so many people come up here and speak about their experiences and their knowledge on transforming into an international entrepreneur after moving abroad. Now, we do have a few housekeeping things I want to go over before we start. So, if in the unlikely event that we need to evacuate the auditorium, I'm going to point out the exits to you now. Please bear in mind your exit may be behind you. Now, I know what you're thinking. I look a little bit like a flight attendant. I actually was a flight attendant a couple of years ago, so it's bringing a lot of memories back to me. Second of all, if you haven't done so already, please put your phones on silent. That would be great. But we do encourage you to take photos and videos throughout and tag us on social media. We do have a hashtag. Everyone has a hashtag. It's Reinvention Madrid, so make sure you pop that along with it, and that way we can find your posts. Last thing, which is actually for the end, but I thought I'd mention now, this is a big auditorium. Hopefully you've been enjoying all the beers and the falafel at the top. If there is any trash at the end, we do have trash bins or bins, however you call them. If you could just clean up as you go, that would be great. Now, this event has been organized by three lovely women, which have worked so hard to put this together. Yes, give them a round of applause. They are sitting to my left. I will introduce them in a second. But this event would not be possible without our partners and sponsors. And we have an array of partners and sponsors that have very kindly helped us out with this event. So first of all, I want to recognize Sterna Abogados, which is an English-speaking lawyer firm here in Madrid. They specialize in Spanish law, so if you need any help with work visas or permits or residency applications for yourself or for your employees, please get in touch with them and they'll be able to help you out. Also, SiteGround, I know some of you are familiar with that. SiteGround is a web hosting company that has over 2 million domains. So if you have a website or you're thinking of having a website, they are your go-to people. Also, you probably can see in the front row here, we have Berta Delgado here from Yan Mag, which is a magazine to help publicize professionals in all areas, but mainly focusing in the arts and culture. So if you see her taking pictures this evening, please give her a smile. We're very grateful for her and her husband to come and join us to capture this event. Now, our last two sponsors here this evening, Peninsula and Refusion, who are the people that have sponsored the beers this evening. Have you been enjoying the beers? Yes, hopefully. I can see beers here. And also, we have some falafel at the back as well. I'd like to welcome up two people now who are just going to tell you a little bit about. So please welcome up Christina Sampson, co-owner of Refusion, and Roman Joe, founder of Peninsula. So give them a round of applause.
Thank you so much, Valentina. It's really great to be here. Just a quick note about Refusion. So my name is Tina Sampson. I'm actually the founder of Madrid for Refugees and the co-owner of Refusion Delivery. So we are a new restaurant in the north of Madrid near Plaza Castilla, and we hire refugee chefs. We have refugee chefs from Syria, Venezuela, Sudan, and Morocco. So I invite you to come visit our restaurant. You can come and enjoy a meal there, or you can also get it delivered to your home or your office. Our website is refusondelivery.com, and we have some flyers there. So I hope you come check us out.
Thank you.
Hey guys, my name is Roman Joe. I'm the founder of Peninsula. We're a craft brewery located in Alcobendas, really close to Madrid. And we started our project, my wife and I, 2 years ago. As you can see, I'm an international also entrepreneur here in Madrid. I'm from Venezuela. I love the idea of hiring refugees from there. And we really appreciate sponsoring events like this. I think entrepreneurship is the future, and I think we should all back it. So thank you for the organizers.
Thank you. All right. Now, we do have some other people here that have helped make this event run smoothly. So if you are a volunteer this evening, I would like you to stand up. If you are a volunteer, please stand up. Don't be shy. Okay, we have 4 people in the front. There's actually 9 volunteers here that I guess they're maybe not in the room. I would like to give a shout out to them because they've helped us set up, they've helped to check you in, and they're going to be helping us out all throughout the event. So please give a round of applause to our volunteers. We have Nicoletta, Laura, Either, Cynthia, Lisa, Astrid, Lou, Lorena, and Sonia. And over at the back, you can't quite see him, but Pat is over there in the booth. He is sorting out our cameras this evening. So please give a round of applause to all of them for helping us out this evening. Thank you. Now, I want to get to know you a little bit better, okay? So, by show of hands up who considers themselves as an entrepreneur or does not consider themselves as an entrepreneur. I know, I can see some of you got the joke. The idea is everyone to put their hand up, but that's okay. The reason for this pointless activity is basically to say that it doesn't matter whether you are an entrepreneur or consider yourself as an entrepreneur or whether you're thinking of embarking on that journey. The reason for you coming here this evening is because you were able to resonate with maybe one of the speakers or with the topic of discussion. And I can tell you tonight, your brains are going to be bursting with ideas. So I hope you're ready to feel empowered. I hope you're ready to feel inspired. And leave here this evening motivated to transform into the person that you want to be. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome up our first speaker. She is the queen of online and offline meaningful gatherings and connections. She is the creator of the Madrid Blogger Network, Madrid's largest community of content creators and bloggers, and she is the founder of Shiva Roofeh, a community for women over the age of 30 who want to change their life through travel. Please welcome to the stage, Cepee Tabibian.
So much. All right. It's great to see so many familiar faces in the crowd. Okay, so it was my first web summit. And as I sat at the dinner table with 10 incredible women in tech, I started to get anxious. As a social media marketer and community builder who helps women change their life through travel, I started to wonder, what was I even doing here? And what was my connection to tech? But before I could even think of anything to say, the intros around the table started. And as I listened, everybody just sounded so accomplished. And I just needed to sound worthy of being there. But before I knew it, it was my turn. And so I said, "Hi, my name is Cepee. I'm from Texas. I live in Madrid, and I have a little business called Shaheen Samavati. It's my side hustle." And as soon as those words, little business and side hustle, came out of my mouth, I cringed on the inside. But luckily for me, my friends at the table had my back, and they called me out in the kindest of ways and asked me to redo my intro as the boss woman that I am. So you see, assuming a new identity is a practice. And since that dinner in November, I've been practicing. But what I've learned on my own path to reinvention while living here in Spain is bridging that gap between who you are and who you want to become requires owning who you need to be. So a few months before that dinner, I had made my first big sale. And it was a 5-figure one, in fact. I had sold out my first ever retreat, and 10 women were coming from the US to Morocco to come spend a week with me, someone they had never met. So just making that sale validated that I had created something of value in my online community of over 5,000 women around the world. And we had even been mentioned in Forbes and USA Today. But why was I still so uncomfortable with referring to my new business as a business? Well, it's because I was struggling with becoming. And when I think of what reinvention means, reinvention is an act of becoming. And that's a process of becoming who you need to be in the world and how you want to be seen in the world. So for anyone out there who's trying to pave a new professional path, you got to get used to the idea of owning who you need to be. Is there anyone out there who struggles with this, for being who you need to be for your business? Some people? Okay, I see some hands. It's okay, I do too. I go through that. But just know, with each mini milestone of your becoming, you build another layer of confidence that will help you transform into someone that you can't even see yet, and it'll take you to places that you can't even imagine. Just a few years ago, I moved here to Madrid to teach English, and I can tell you, I never would have imagined that I'd be standing on this stage at Google for Startups speaking to all of y'all. And so I had to go through my own reinvention for this to even become a possibility and a reality. So, what does it take to do this? To become, to reinvent? Well, at the root of reinvention is self-discovery. And to discover ourselves, we have to be willing to play with our identity. And what I mean by that, playing with our identity, is just trying new things and going beyond what we expect of ourselves. And so we often think of our identity as this fixed structure around us that determines who we are and who we aren't. And we create this identity with the actions we take and the choices we make. And over time, we start to see ourselves as someone who does X, but not Y. And as the world watches, it reinforces this identity by also seeing us as someone who does X, but not Y. So what happens when you try to do something new and you try to move beyond this identity, that's when those feelings of fear and insecurity and doubt and self-consciousness come up. And what we do to try not to feel those things, we often choose to feel safe and stay safe within the walls of our identity. But just know that playing it safe keeps us from realizing our full potential, and it keeps us from becoming. So in order to become, we have to intentionally play with our identity. And this means you gotta let go of who you think you are. You gotta start making different choices and do different things so that you can pave a new path of opportunities for yourself. But of course, this is easier said than done, right? Trying new things is scary. Does anyone out there have stage fright? Where are my stage fright people? All right. Have you ever forced yourself to speak in public? Good. And for those that are still learning Spanish, have you ever gone to a meetup or a networking event in Spanish? Yeah. How did that feel, putting yourself out there and trying something new? It's scary. It's uncomfortable. But that's exactly what it takes to reinvent. You have to actively seek new things and say yes to people and to actions and to opportunities that are in alignment with your goals and interests, no matter how intimidating they are or how unworthy you feel. So when I moved here, I promised myself that I had to get out of teaching, and I gave myself 1 year or else I'd have to move back to the US. And so what I did is I applied to marketing jobs left and right, and despite everyone telling me that I would never get sponsored as an American, I scored a job with a Spanish startup. And I gotta tell you, that was the first time for me having that experience of trying on a new identity here that scared the living daylights out of me. Because first of all, I didn't understand why I even got hired. It was for a social media job, and at that time, my experience with social media was limited to just staying in touch with friends and family on Facebook. But I said yes to a position that I didn't feel ready for, and I accepted the discomfort that was gonna come with that. And it's because I was just so eager to change the path that I was on. And I'm not gonna lie, it was a struggle. I struggled with the ins and outs of adapting to a Spanish work culture, with working in a language that I was not comfortable in, and being managed to a team of 8 people when I had never managed anyone in my life. And so I felt like a fraud on a daily basis in my own skin. But I had to show up for myself, no matter how uncomfortable and how painful it was, and I had to try to become who I needed to be to succeed. And by becoming on a daily basis, I became. And that experience of committing to trying on a new identity, it just changed how I saw myself, and it changed what I thought was possible for myself. And so right there, my reinvention had started. And what followed were the most transformational years of my life. I had built the confidence from that experience to try so many new things. And so I started a blog. I had never written before, never done anything creative, and I called myself a blogger. I started a community to meet other bloggers, even though I had never built anything before, and I became a community manager. And with the little experience I gained in social media from that job, I owned my profession and I started applying to new jobs, and I scored a full-time remote gig that paid double the Spanish job and 4 times what I made as an English teacher. And last, I created another community called She Hit Refresh, just as a hobby, and I called myself the founder. And before I knew it, I had created this global community that I was able to turn into a business last year. So by showing up as who I needed to be for each of these growth spurts, I became a new version of myself, and I created new opportunities. And not only that, I ultimately became more of who I really am. And it was hard, but reinvention is hard. And that's why you have to be intentional about it, because if you don't, fear is going to hold you back from who you're meant to be. And who was I to become these things? You know, what would my friends think? And what if I failed? All those thoughts ran through my head, but I moved forward anyway. And I know that my reinvention is a direct result from being open to play with my identity. And when I really think about it, the reason why I was able to reinvent myself here in Spain in a way that I just couldn't in the US is because I really believe that moving abroad creates a fertile landscape for us to try on different identities and to have this identity shift. Because just being in a foreign environment and being in having new experiences on a daily basis forces us to become someone new. I mean, here we're building a world in another language, and we're trying to understand how to navigate this new reality. And on top of that, we're also chasing new dreams and making different choices. So if you have any doubts in your ability to reinvent, just know that by moving abroad and by being here, you've already proven that you're the type of person who is already on a path to reinvention. And you already have what it takes to make it happen. Right? Because you intentionally left your comfort zone and you purposely disrupted the path that you were on. I disrupted a perfectly comfortable path in Texas. I had a great life. I had everything. I had a house, car, great job, comfort, and routine. But for me, something was missing. I felt disconnected, and I was bored with the monotony of a conventional life. And so I needed a change, and I came here to make that happen. And as I've mentioned, since I moved here in 2015, I've been able to become many things. But I didn't dare attempt to become any of those things back in the US. And I think that's because I didn't have to. There was no need for me to reinvent myself because that conventional path was already paved out for me. And so by becoming here, I had to pave my own path to find a way out of teaching. And so on this path, I got to choose who I wanted to be. And that's a really beautiful thing about moving abroad, is that it's much easier here to explore these different sides of ourselves because we're surrounded by new people. That's powerful. We have fewer inhibitions because we aren't carrying the weight of our identity, that identity that we co-created with the people who knew us back home. Here we get a blank slate. We get to start over. And with that, you're more likely to try new things. And I bet you've probably already tried a few things here that you may have shied away from back home. And if you haven't, I highly encourage you to do so. Because every day that you intentionally and even unintentionally do new things, you start to build the confidence that allows you to hop off that hamster wheel of what you've always done and try out and test out these new versions of yourself. And the more that you do these things, the more you become. So if you remember, at the beginning of this talk, I said that bridging the gap between who we are and who we want to become requires owning who we need to be. And for me, that meant moving abroad, trying on these different identities, and embracing who I was becoming. So my ask of you, when you leave here and go back into your lives, is to please try on those different identities. Because reinvention means no more thinking small. You gotta go big. You gotta lean into the discomfort, and you gotta do things that you've never done, and you gotta do them over and over and over. And you gotta do them when you're scared, and you gotta do them when you don't know what you're doing. Because you have to create your own pressure to transform. And over time, these intentional changes and choices, They're going to create opportunities that are going to allow you to become who you need to be to rise to the occasion. And so since Web Summit, I've been trying on my new identity whenever I get the chance. And so this is the biggest crowd that I have tried this out in front of. So here we go. Hi, my name is Cepee. I'm from Texas. I live in Madrid. And I'm the founder of a business called She Hit Refresh.
Ladies and gentlemen, give a big round of applause to Cepee.
Thank you.
Can I just say, from somebody standing on this stage to you, how nerve-wracking it is to be standing up here with you guys in front of us. Like, even though Cepee made that look really easy, it's really quite difficult to come up here. So we really do appreciate your enthusiasm and your applause for everybody that's going to come up stage this evening, because we are also trying to improve ourselves. I'll be honest, before I came up on stage, I was freaking out. But they say that when you come up on stage, you should just imagine everyone naked and it should be fine. It's not fine. But that's neither here or there. Now, we're going to move on swiftly with our second speaker of this evening. She is a cultural intelligence expert. She spends half her time in executive education and half her time as the campus director of the Geneva Business School. And she works full-time teaching people how not to be assholes. So please welcome Shiva Roofeh.
Hello, everyone. Is the mic? Yes, it is. Okay. I've not had enough alcohol to be on this stage, and I'm definitely not as polished as Cepee is, so expect a lot of confusion and messiness. Expect a human being, basically. So as Valentina hinted at, when people ask me what I do, I tell them that I teach people to not be assholes and that I fuck with people's heads. And this last part is a process that I call the Mindfuck. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, because for me, reinvention is the ultimate mindfuck. But how am I defining that? What does that even mean? For me, mindfuck is the process of finding and facing parts of yourself that you didn't know existed, right? So finding and facing the parts of yourself that you didn't know existed. And if we go back to what Cepee said about reinvention being the process of becoming, right? This process of trying on different identities, to see who you want to be. Well, to do that, to try on different identities and to see who you want to be, you have to know who the fuck you are. And to do that, you need to start looking at your assumptions about life, the beliefs that you hold. You have to start looking at the stories that you tell yourself. The stories that you tell yourself about, I love them, keep doing that. The stories that you tell yourself about the world. The stories you tell yourself about you and your role in this world. The stories that you tell yourself about what's right, what's wrong, what's good, and what's bad, right? You have to know your stories so that you can change your stories when and if they stop serving you. So this is a story of my stories and how I had to face myself to reinvent myself. My story started in Tehran, Iran, where I was born in the 1980s. And I was born to a Jewish father and a Muslim mother. And I was born to a Jewish father and a Muslim mother at a time when it was illegal for a Muslim to marry anyone else but another Muslim. So what my parents did was, my dad had his own reinvention, and he converted to Islam. So they got married and they lived as Muslims. But that didn't stop the secret police from knocking on our door, trying to arrest my family for my parents' marriage. Now, of course, they couldn't do that in the end because we were able to prove that they were both Muslims. But it doesn't matter, because that story stayed in my head, right? The consequences of a personal reinvention stayed in my head. I was also born in the context of a country that had just come out of a revolution, and it was a revolution that drastically changed our government from one system to another. And that revolution, directly and indirectly, led to us being invaded, and then to a 10-year war. And I was born in the middle of that war. So I was born with bombs and breadlines, with the chaos, with the not knowing if I was going to be alive or dead. If I walked out the street, what would I find? So if you realize now that the two first interactions I had with reinvention were not nice ones, right? That personal reinvention led to us almost going to jail. And that national reinvention led to chaos, it led to destruction, it led to war. So the story that I told myself about reinvention and change is that it's bad. More than bad, it's dangerous, it is life-threatening. Avoid it at all costs. Now fast forward a bit, and we leave Iran as refugees, and we stop over in Italy, and I say stop over because if you're not familiar with the process, there's always a processing center. So our processing center was a small town outside of Rome. And remember, this is in the 1980s. And we were going to be there for about a year, so I had to go to school. But the only school that was available was a Catholic school. So now you have a Jewish, Muslim, Iranian refugee going to a Catholic school in Italy in the 1980s. You can imagine what the nuns' reaction was to me, right? Now, unfortunately, they reacted very typically the way that many of us do, which is fear, rejection, isolation. They locked me in the closet. They wouldn't let me speak with the other children. They wouldn't let me interact with them as if I was some sort of a virus that would infect them. And even though a part of me knew that they were doing the best that they could with the tools that they had, I mean, I don't think they woke up that morning and thought, we're going to fuck with this little kid. They were doing the best that they could. But it was still messed up, right? That's not okay. And that was my first interaction with institutional authority. So the story that I told myself there was, one, authority is bad. It cannot be trusted at all. And I also told myself another story about visibility and being different. That visibility and being different are not good. They will get you isolated. They will cause pain, right? So right now I have reinvention and change, dangerous, deadly. Visibility, not good. Now fast forward a bit more, we finally end up in the United States. That was our final center. That's where we ended up. That's where I grew up. And I loved growing up in New York City, but it was hard. My parents worked 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. And even with that, we had to, cut corners, cut coupons, and save as much as we could. So, I mean, I wore hand-me-downs until I was about 16 years old, and not just from my mother and my sister, but from my father as well. So you can imagine how I was going to school. And I had the very typical immigrant haircut where, they put the bowl on top of your head and then just cut. If anyone comes from a third world country, you are familiar with this strategy, because that's free, and that's like a template for your hair, whereas a salon costs money. But the one thing that really stayed in my head was not my father's clothes, wearing my father's clothes at 16, or the bowl haircut. What really stayed in my head was the times when I would go to the supermarket or the department store even with my mother. And of course, we had the coupons, we clipped them out. We already knew it was on sale. And we also tried to manage to use the coupons for something that was already on sale. So you know the thing they have on coupons now at the bottom that says this cannot be used with any other offer? I swear to God, that's because of my mother. So we already had all that. But also, when we went up to the cashier, to the cash register, my mother put on her attitude, her New York City attitude, and she demanded that they use their employee discount for us. And she would not leave until they either gave us the discount, the manager came, or they kicked us out, right? And I'm like 13, 14, 15 years old here. I just want to be normal. I mean, I don't want to stand out in the United States. You don't want to stick out. Like, not when you're a refugee, not when you're half Jewish, half Muslim. You just want to fit in. And here I am with my mother embarrassing the fuck out of me, and I just wanted to die. But I also remember the reason why this was so embarrassing for me was partly the visibility aspect, right? But it was also because I thought, God, we are so poor. We are that poor that we have to negotiate for $1, right? I mean, we were buying something on sale for $5, and my mother was still negotiating for cents. So the story that stayed in my head is negotiating is for poor people because rich people can afford to not do it. Now, let's pause for a second here, and I want you to imagine the internal resistance I had, and imagine how challenging it was for me when decades later, I decide to quit my easy, comfortable 9-to-5 job and start my own business. Imagine what a mindfuck that was, trying to start my own business, thinking that one, change is dangerous, visibility, not good, and negotiating is just for poor people. You can't start a business with those beliefs. It doesn't work. Doesn't work. Now, I always knew that my kind of reaction and sensitivities to money matters in general and to change and to visibility were different than most people. I knew it was more difficult for me than those I saw around me, but I honestly thought it was because everyone else had this magic, innate unicorn skill set that they were born with that I missed out on, right? Like they taught it in school and I was absent that day in school, and what the hell did I miss? And then I started to realize, wait a minute, it can't be the skill sets, because I went to classes for negotiation, I went to classes for networking and how to be visible, and it didn't work. Doesn't matter how much I tried to upskill myself in those, as long as I kept on telling myself that visibility is dangerous, I would always be self-sabotaging. Now, interestingly enough, the thing that made me realize that it's not the skills that I have that are holding me back, but it's the stories that I'm telling myself that are holding me back. That thing that made me realize that, it wasn't war, it wasn't poverty, it wasn't being a refugee, it wasn't any of that big stuff, and I realized considering my life big is kind of subjective. For me, the thing that made me realize it's the stories and not the skills was my marriage, and then my divorce. Now, I got divorced just 2 years after I got married, which was 4 years after we met. And I remember sitting on the sofa after we got divorced and thinking, I knew I didn't want to get married. I knew it. I knew it when he asked me. When we first started to talk about it, I knew it when he proposed. And I knew it when I was standing up in front of the judge and saying, yes, I do. I knew it. Then if I knew it, if I knew that I did not want to get married, why did I say yes? Why couldn't I just say no? And I realized, well, the reason I said yes was because I didn't know how to say no. I was raised with the belief and the story that other people's happiness means more than my pain. I was raised to think of the word no as something that breaks harmony and causes pain. So the story I had in my head around no was no destroys things. And yet here I was, having said yes, and I created the biggest destruction I've ever done in my life. How is it that I stayed true to my story and then the opposite happened? That's when I realized, fuck, the 3 decades that I've been carrying this story, it's been fake. It's been bullshit, right? That's when I realized, okay, you know what? I need to find more stories that I'm telling myself, because I don't want to be this person. And who do I want to be, and what are the stories that the person I want to be tells themselves? So I decided, well, I want to be a person who sees change as an opportunity. That's one story I want to tell myself. I want to be a person who believes that negotiating is a tool for fairness. I want to be a person who believes that visibility is a tool of positive power. And I want to be a person who understands that saying no is sometimes the kindest thing to do. But for me to have gotten to that point, for me to have realized the stories that I need to change and that I want to start telling myself, I had to go inside myself. I had to explore and discover those dark parts of me that I didn't know existed, right? I couldn't have done that if I didn't have the courage to look inside myself and see the stories that I have. So there's one last thing I want to leave you with, which is to reinvent yourself, you have to know yourself, right? To do that, you have to open your mind, and you have to find and face those parts of you that you didn't know existed. So essentially, to do that, you have to mindfuck yourself. You have to fuck with yourself, right? And I really, really encourage you to do that, because I promise you that if you do, it will be the best sex of your entire fucking life. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Shiva. Wow. I don't know about you, but I've got like so many light bulb moments happening in my head right now, and leaving us with that last picture reference. I'm just thinking all sorts right now. All right, we are going to move on, and our third speaker of this evening is an American journalist turned Spain-based entrepreneur. She is the co-founder and CEO of multilingual content agency VeraContent and creator of Spain Guru and the Content Mix communities. Please welcome Shaheen Samavati.
Thank you. So, yeah, those were some hard acts to follow, but I'll do my best. So I'm Shaheen Samavati, and I'm a CEO, although it's taken me quite a while to see myself as one. I remember the first time that somebody called me a boss, and it took me by surprise. I was on a business trip in Portugal with a team member of mine, and we just checked in the hotel, and she got a phone call and said, "I can't talk right now, I'm with my boss." And I thought, who, me? I mean, my company was small and nimble. We had a team that was really involved in decision-making, and everything was done collaboratively, like a lot of early-stage startups. So I really didn't see myself as an authority figure or even much of a leader. I definitely didn't see myself as a boss. But a lot of things have changed since then. Now VeraContent is a company with more than 20 employees, and we're managing content channels in European languages for global brands. Sorry. Thanks. Thank you. So, so basically my company now is 4 years old, and we are managing content channels in European languages for global brands. We've grown a lot. We have great processes and a great team, and great clients, and we keep attracting more. So things are going really well for the business these days, and it's been a big change for the business and also for me. Like, I've had to really transform who I am to be able to become the person I needed to be able to run the business. So I want to share with you today like 3 ways that I've done that. And basically, one was deciding to really commit to the business, and I'll talk more about that later. But really forcing myself to focus on the right things, and then also doing everything I can to learn from others. So so what really attracted me to entrepreneurship in the first place is this ability to, like, getting people together to work on an idea and making things happen. And I get really excited about new and exciting projects, and I think that's important. But I wonder, how many of you also are excited about starting new things and new projects? Yes. And I think we saw earlier there's a few entrepreneurs in the room, so I think it makes sense, because I think that's a really important quality of an entrepreneur. It's a big part of the entrepreneurial spirit. But I think it's also something that, as the company grows, we have to rein in a little bit to be an effective CEO. For me, it really, like, being a CEO requires a set of skills that just doesn't come naturally a lot of times for that kind of early-stage entrepreneur who's really excitable. So even though both things are necessary, I think. So to give you a bit of context about me, so I wanted to say that I realized that I was the one who really needed to step up. I think, like in any early stage business, somebody needs to step up and really take on those responsibilities of keeping the organization focused. And I realized that I was the one who needed to do that in my business. But I want to first give you some context about me and my background, and how I got into entrepreneurship in the first place. So originally, I got interested in entrepreneurship working as a technology journalist in the US. So I had been living in Ohio, and that's where I'm from, working for a newspaper, and I got to interview a lot of entrepreneurs and learn their stories, and I got really interested in that, and I thought, wow, that's something I would like to do too. I'd love to start my own business. But I didn't really have any idea like what business I wanted to do or how I was going to do that, like no idea how to pull that off. So I thought, I want to get a business education. So that's when I decided to come to Madrid to study at IE Business School, where, shout out, to do an MBA. And actually, it was great because it was a really supportive community, international, and it gave me my first foray into entrepreneurship. I actually worked on a project while I was a student there, and we built this travel app, some fellow students and I, and we actually launched it in the market, but it really didn't get any traction. There just wasn't a market for it. So after the MBA, I basically didn't have any more idea about what kind of business I could start or how I could do it, and I also now had like a bunch of student debt from this program that I just did. So at that point, I decided to take a job in corporate communications here in Spain. And I did that for a couple of years and gained some valuable experience learning another side of business. But a couple of years into it, I was approached by some friends of mine who were starting a new business and had a really exciting project. And they made me an offer I couldn't refuse. They offered me a minor equity share, no salary, and the opportunity to learn from seasoned entrepreneurs. And so I decided to take it. And that so in that business is Spot a Home. It's a real estate startup that some of you might know. I was there at the very early stage, and I actually decided to leave the project after just 9 months, partly for financial reasons, partly because I just decided it wasn't my path. But the company has gone on to do amazing things since then, and they've raised over 60 million in venture capital, and they've expanded all across Europe, and it's for booking housing online. Not going to go into that, but but anyway, my time at Spot a Home was really an amazing opportunity to learn about a lot of different aspects of operating a business. So I felt like, I got to set up a lot of processes, and it was my first time managing a team, and I think I really learned during that time actually what goes into building a business and making it grow and making it scalable. But when I left Spot a Home, I really wasn't in the position to start another business. I was like, great, yeah, now I have the knowledge. I'm going to go start my own business. But I didn't have the funds really to do it at the time, or it wasn't practical. I needed to pay my bills and the student loans still. So I decided to take a kind of safe route and use my background in writing and journalism to take on basically writing gigs. I did a lot of journalism writing. I did like Spanish economy stories for the Wall Street Journal. I also did corporate copywriting gigs for big multinationals, and actually that is what turned out, kind of evolved into my current business, but I didn't know that at the time. So basically, at that point, I started collaborating with my now business partners, who are James Lehue and Daphne Ben-Yoris, and they were founders of a blog called Naked Madrid, and they were also talented translators and working to start a translation business. So I had been collaborating with them and on my writing projects that needed to be translated, and we saw there was this big demand for managing writing projects in different languages. So we started collaborating more and more together, and it's a long story, but one thing led to another, and we ended up deciding to form a company together. That company's VeraContent, and I was kind of the de facto leader of this company, but in that first year or so, it was still a very organic and unorganized organization where each of us was kind of managing our own client projects and a couple of interns and freelancers. And I knew the way that we were operating at the time wasn't scalable. It wasn't something that was going to grow. And I knew that something needed to change, but I wasn't quite sure what I needed to do. So, and I remember around that time, I went to a talk by Catherine Hai, who's now a really good friend of mine, and she's also the founder of a company called Class A Language Training. And she was talking about her experience of transitioning from seeing herself as a teacher to seeing herself as a business owner, and how that really, her mindset shift played an important role in really changing the company. So I'm kind of copying her talk, because that's really the point that I want to get across too. I hope to kind of inspire you guys the way she inspired me, because I think it really I hope that what I'm saying can prove to you that it is possible to get back past those mental roadblocks that might be stopping you from doing something great with your business. Because I think a lot of times we think oh, my business isn't working because I didn't have the right timing, or my product isn't good enough, or there was too much competition, or any of those reasons. But I think more often than not, it's actually an internal issue. It's that we don't have the mental clarity to see where to take the business and make those decisions. So, at that time, that talk made me realize, I have those same issues. And I realized that my kind of mindset and my seeing myself as a journalist, as a writer, and not really as a business owner was holding me back. I remember also around this time, a friend of mine recommended me for an opportunity. I was already in the midst of the business. We had clients. We were starting to grow. We had a lot of interest in what we were doing. And there was a lot of things that needed to be figured out, a lot of processes that needed to be put in place. And when I had all this on my plate, a friend of mine recommended me for a writing position for a technology website. And I knew, like, I do not have time for that. I really shouldn't take that on. That's going to distract me from my business. But for some reason, I said yes anyway. Actually, kind of goes back to what Shiva was saying about saying no. But yeah, so despite my own like knowing better, like I decided, yeah, I went ahead and did that. And then later, when after I went to Catherine's talk and everything, I decided to pursue business coaching, and really the business coach helped me figure out that, wow, I was spending my time on a lot of the wrong things. I was spending a lot of hours working on client projects myself, and then I had a lot of distractions doing the journalism stuff, organizing events, community stuff, and as you guys might know, I have a lot of projects that I've been involved in the past, like Spain Guru, for example. So I really needed to focus, and yeah, that's something that the business coach helped me a lot with. And my role now has completely changed. Like now I'm really, I mean, when I first started with the coach, it was about building all the processes in the business, but now it's really evolved to my managing the leadership team, setting a strategy and a roadmap for the company, and setting goals and objectives for the team to make that strategy a reality. So it's had a huge impact on the business. For example, we used to have a big range of language services that we offered, but now we've really narrowed it down to the ones that appeal most to our target client, which are marketing directors of growth firms. So I think if I hadn't had the mental clarity, like I wouldn't have been able to make those decisions that have led our company to significant growth. So now, as you can see, I've really started to embrace my role as CEO. I finally updated my LinkedIn and took off a lot of the journalism stuff and emphasized my management experience. And I've also come to the realization that it's okay if people call me their boss. Actually, that's a good thing. And it's my job to keep growing into the person I need to be a great boss. Just going back to like my strategies, basically for me it was really deciding to commit to the business. And as I said, that was something that coaching really helped me with. But I think these are also questions you can just ask yourself, like, why do I want to start a business? How big do I want it to grow? What is really my vision? And am I really committed to making it happen? And you have to be 100% in, because if not, it's not worth the effort. And then the other point was about focus. I mean, there's no magic bullet for focus, but if I could say one thing about it, I think the key is really just asking yourself all the time, what's the most important thing I could be doing right now to reach my goals? And then creating frameworks for yourself to constantly re-ask yourself that question. And then, as I was saying, just learning from other entrepreneurs, I've made a big concerted effort to get to know other entrepreneurs who've done what I want to achieve and learn from their experiences. A couple of great organizations I'm a part of that have helped me with that are the Entrepreneurs Organization, which is like a global network for kind of support network, as well as the International Women in Business here in Madrid. It's a local organization, and both of those have great mentorship opportunities, and I'm sure there's many other great organizations out there for that. And then lastly is just related to learning is reading. One thing a habit that I've really instilled since really deciding to commit to my business is reading every single day, at least 20 minutes, some kind of business or personal development books, because I feel like to be an effective leader, you need to be constantly getting in other opinions and incorporating that into your decision making, and that's been a really key, and it's completely like broadening my mind. So I totally recommend read. It's a really small investment to make, and it has a huge payoff. And you might ask me, what should you read? And I actually thought you might ask me that, so I put a post on my LinkedIn yesterday. So with like the 7 books that I've read so far that I think have had the biggest impact on my business. And so basically, I hope that by sharing this with all of you, that it proves that you don't have to have everything figured out when you start your business in order to build something great. Basically, you just have to be committed to become the person you need to be able to run that business and put in the work to get there. So where are you and who do you want to become? Maybe it's not a CEO. Maybe you want to become anything else, a marketing expert or an actor or anything. But whatever it is, in order to take on that identity, you're going to have to commit to really work to get there. So are you ready to take on that commitment? Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Shaheen. Wow, in the space of about 45 minutes, we have seen so many, well, 3 people come up here. I say so many people, it's been 3 people. We're just going to reset the stage as I continue talking. And I just want to say how inspired I am with these ladies this evening. Cepee went us through Reinvention and the act of becoming. Shiva told us that we needed to fuck with ourselves. I can't believe I'm saying fuck on stage. It actually feels really natural, and I don't know if that's a problem that I have, but I'm going to say it anyway. And Shaheen gave us some really great examples of how she's been able to overcome challenges and things that she's done to be able to focus, to have a successful business in whichever way you see success. So that is the end of the speaker series for this evening, but please give a round of applause once again for Cepee, Shiva, and Shaheen. Now, you will get a chance to ask questions a little bit later, but now what we're going to do is we're actually going to switch to a more of a panel discussion where we're going to bring up 3 new people for you. These people are going to share experiences and reinventions they've had since coming to Spain and launching and growing a business in a foreign country. So we're going to make Shaheen work a little bit more this evening because I'm actually going to welcome her back up because she's going to moderate this panel. So please, once again, welcome Shaheen.
Hello again. Know you guys missed me. So we have an awesome panel here of international entrepreneurs who are going to be sharing their experiences. And I'm going to call them up to the stage once the mics are sorted out. So, well, I'll call you up one at a time, maybe. Maybe Rika can come up first. Rika Cristanto. Welcome. She's co-founder and COO of OnTruck, a shipping startup. And then, well, Joshua Novik. So he's executive director of Bondo Advisors, and he's also the former CEO of Antivenio, which is a marketing technology company. It's a big company now, actually. So then, Lauren Aloise. Welcome to the stage. Oh, yes, I'll get that for you. I don't know. Turn it on. So Lauren is the CEO and co-founder of Devour Tours, which is a food tour company that operates all over Europe. That's okay. So thank you. So maybe each of you can just tell us a little bit about how you ended up in Spain and starting businesses here. It happens to be that we're all Americans, by the way. So yeah. So maybe Rika, if you want to start.
So I came to.
Is that on? I don't know.
Is it on? Nope. I came to Spain about 3 years ago. I came for love. I got married with a Spanish guy that I met in business school. And yeah, if I had known that all Spanish men want to come home to mom, I may have reconsidered when I first met him. But no. I guess I found, I came to Madrid unemployed, and I found kind of a great group of guys who were looking to start this trucking startup. I was like the billing invoicing person, took a 80% pay cut, and yeah, but I guess it's been really fun so far.
So what does OnTruck do, maybe, just real quick?
Of course.
And what's your role there?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I am COO, but that basically means whatever anyone needs to get done like that. I realize that there's many things around processes or like people just like fixing problems that other people don't want to deal with. I end up doing all of that. So to be honest, anything the CEO or the C-level needs to get done. And what we do, we are a platform, an online platform to connect companies like Pepsi, P&G that need to move their road freight, and we connect them with truckers on the other side. We're in like London, Spain, France, Netherlands. It's been definitely not my industry that I would have chosen if I had started my own company by myself. but it's also a massive, massive market in Europe.
Yeah, very cool. So Joshua, so what's your Spain story? How'd you end up here?
Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm American. I'm the only guy here, actually.
The moderator was supposed to be Jaime Novoa, but unfortunately he...
I feel like,
Yeah.
like, oh.
It's unusual now. Yeah.
I feel strange, but okay. Well, no, I'm American, and but I'm kind of I'm a foreigner. I'm basically a foreigner anywhere I go, or I'm or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe I'm at home anywhere I go because I was born in the States, but I grew up in Italy. I lived in England, lived in Spain, moved back to the States. I've been kind of around, and I started up a company here in Spain quite some time ago. I'm married to a Spaniard, which was called Antebeño, which we actually grew until we actually quoted it on the stock market in Paris to do something different, and which I finally exited a couple of years ago, and now I'm into something new, which is basically advising companies in M&A. So that's the kind of, in a nutshell, the story.
Very cool. Okay. So Lauren, your Spain story.
Thank you, Shaheen. Yeah, so I came to Spain about 11 years ago. I was fresh out of college. I came on a visa that would allow me to teach English, and figured I would kind of discover myself through a little bit of a gap year after coming out of hospitality and tourism management school. Learn a bit more about Spanish food, which was becoming really popular in the States at the time. And I ended up also meeting a Spaniard and deciding to stay and eventually marrying him, and at the same time building a business. I've always loved food, and I've always loved tourism, and so we were in the midst of the recession, and I just moved to Madrid. Previously I'd lived in Seville. And I stumbled upon the idea of food tours, which are walking tours that are about 3-4 hours, where people try a bunch of different foods that are typical to the region or the neighborhood, and learn the stories of the local community behind the food. And I thought that sounded like a great way to really connect people to local culture and also support the economy, which was key at the time, when a lot of small businesses were really, really suffering. So started up in 2012 with the tours, and since then we've expanded throughout Spain, and now we are in 9 different cities in Europe, and with plans to launch in the US next year.
Great. Yeah, so I'm just curious, maybe if any of you, was there anything that came up in the talks that really spoke to any of you that you'd want to just have a direct response to?
Yes, lots of things. First of all, thank you to Cepee, to Shiva, and to you, Shaheen. I mean, those talks were, I think everyone can agree, amazing, really inspirational. And I think that, I really resonated with what you said about suddenly finding yourself the boss, because I think our companies have grown similarly, that they started really small and really kind of, a parallel organization, and then became much larger and more hierarchical. Is that a word? And it was odd for me as well the first time that someone said, I'm with my boss, or I have to check with my boss, because that word felt like a really big word. And I definitely suffered, I think, like everyone here on stage today, from that imposter syndrome, where it's like, what am I doing? How am I qualified to be leading these people? I went to undergrad business school, but I didn't have an MBA. Should I have had an MBA? Should I have gotten an MBA? I didn't know. There were all these questions running through my head. I had to learn how to read a P&L. I had to learn all of these things that people often take for granted that the boss would just know how to do. And I felt I was constantly 30 seconds, maybe 5 minutes ahead of everyone else. And so, and I still feel that way a lot of the time. So dealing with that has been really challenging but rewarding. And I think the key that I've gotten over the past years is really being vulnerable and letting people know that you don't have all the answers, because you don't, and to act otherwise is very insincere and not a great example of leadership. So you have to be strong in your decisions and in what you what you put forth as a leader, but you also aren't going to give that illusion of like, I know everything, my ideas are better than yours. I rely a lot on our team, and I say a lot of the times, I don't know, let me get back to you. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, so have either of you guys, how did your past experiences shape your growing into being a leader? I mean, had you had previous leadership experience, or when you started your business, was that kind of your first time managing?
So yeah, the first time I managed a team was at On Truck. For me, it was a very different, let's say, experience. I came from, I'd say, traditional business school background. I did investment banking, and then I did management consulting. But then, I had one of those like, oh my God, I don't know what to do with my life, and quit, got married, and then moved to a new country. But then when I found On Truck, it was every day if you are becoming, then you become. That was really powerful for me because it definitely, the imposter syndrome set in. Is like, okay, I don't know anything. I'm a consultant. I never actually made decisions in my life related to business. But then people are always turning to you to actually solve their problems. And it does take just like kind of repeated, like faking it until you make it. But I would say one of the things that helps from the past experience is the type of like training that you get. Because I think when you come into a startup experience, it's up to you to structure your environment, and you realize also how high the bar needs to be. Many people that come into startups fresh out of undergrad, they are like, yeah, this is how we do it. They've never, spoken in public. They've never created a presentation. They have never had to make like a structured, logical argument to result in a decision. And those are things that, coming from big companies, you do take for granted. Structure and process are actually quite critical at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, can definitely relate to that.
Yeah.
So you, Joshua? Yeah.
Well, in my case, I mean, before I started my company, I had the first company I did. I only worked about 9 months for someone else. I was out of school. I'm a philosophy student, so it was, I knew not a lot about running a business, but I was working about, again, 9-10 months for a company, and then I started my own company, which was I was actually importing ties from Italy to Spain. And I think in my case I didn't really have to this kind of issue of reinventing myself. I didn't have to do it because I didn't know who I was in the first place. So I mean, I was just basically confused, and so it just things happened. I did that, and the company grew, and I started something else, and suddenly I had a couple employees, and I was like 24, and I looked like I was like 14. So. And anytime I was with anyone who was an employee of me, they always thought that they were the boss and I was like the intern. But it's it never, it just never really bothered me. I guess I was too young, for it to really think about it. So it just kind of happened. I kind of moved into becoming a boss, not necessarily a leader. I became a boss. Then slowly, maybe at some point, I became a leader. But it just kind of happened, so it wasn't very traumatic.
I see. So, but your company, Antivegno, how many employees did it have at the time that you left? Like, what was kind of the size?
Oh, when I left, it was about 250 people, something like that. We were in a bunch of company. We were in Spain, Italy, France, and some countries in Latin America. We were in the States. Mm-hmm. It's interesting because as an American, it was kind of the last country that I finally did the States. Mm-hmm. I said, I do it here too. Yeah. So, and I chose New York City because I'm from there, and you figure, if you're gonna open something up, you might as well open up in a city you're gonna enjoy, and you can visit your sister and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. Very cool. So, well, I mean, feel free to chime in with other topics that you guys think are important and want to talk about at any point. But anything burning that you guys. Or want me to just go with my questions? Okay. No, but one question I had is about people say that it's difficult to do business in Spain. I was just wondering if any of you guys had that experience, or I feel like in my case, like I've never done business anywhere else, so I really don't know. Like I feel like, yes, there's red tape, but I'm like, that just seems normal to me. So.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. Like I came here, and similar to you, I was 25 when I started my business, and it was, first time doing it, so I get a good head store, and they do the things, and you sign. That was pretty much, people always ask that, like, isn't it really hard? We're like ranked so badly on that list of where it's, ease of doing business, but I don't have other experience. What I'm finding very hard right now is expansion, because you have to know, all of the laws and regulations of every country you're going into, and with all of the stuff that's happening in the world right now. So that's a challenge that sometimes can keep me up at night, but it's just another thing to grow through and to figure out. Everything is figure outable.
Yeah, definitely.
I haven't found it difficult to do business, but it was a little bit of a culture shock, particularly with giving kind of how direct people communicate, or lack of directness, let's say. I remember coming out of a meeting, I would say 3 months into the job, and someone coming to me afterwards and be like, Riga, you're really mean. I was like, oh my goodness, I've never been called mean in my life. And it's just, number one, again, I don't want to overgeneralize, but at least we suffered a little bit with kind of hierarchy, like, if you're boss, I'm going to listen to everything you say. And also, like, a lack of debate, like direct debate. It's like, if you pose something, I can disagree with you or agree with you, and this was what was pretty common in my previous companies. But here it was like, I don't know, either you cry or someone gets mad, or it's like silence. And I did not know how to cope with that for a while. So I don't know.
But this is like
different
people on
your
team, or people, do you have a lot of international people on your team, or more Spanish, or?
So a lot of Spanish, but it was mandated, I think, from the beginning that everyone needs to speak English, because we were thinking global from the very start. But a lot of Spaniards, primarily, and also a lot of, I'm the only Asian, and I'm like one of 20 women, let's say 10% women, so maybe that also had something to do with it. You're like, shock factor.
I see. Yeah, I was also curious, like being Americans here in Spain, do you think we have like a different approach to business, or any advantages of being American and doing business in Europe? Or do you think it's shaped your way of doing businesses in any way?
I think there's obviously one advantage is especially in a lot of the businesses, there are a lot of things happening in the States which then arrive later to Spain. So if you basically, even just by moving back or just doing things, you discover services which are in the States and they're not here, or talking to people. So I think there's some advantage in that, and often, I think being a foreigner, you can have two different experiences. Sometimes someone will look at you like there's something wrong with you, but I think in other cases, people think you're special, which is nice. They they see someone different. You'll get some people who just don't like people who are different. But I would say on average, especially Spain, I think it's an extremely open culture and open to different people, and they adapt very easily, and they do consider I think foreigners. I'm not saying Americans, but I'll say on average, foreigners as someone they want to meet and do things with. So I feel very welcome. Same thing in Italy. I grew up many years in Italy. I always felt special, and I felt the other kids were all Italians. I was different. I was called Joshua. No one could pronounce my name. It was great.
Yeah. Did you have any?
I was gonna say, like, not so much as an American maybe, but just as a foreigner, and I think that we spoke about this a little bit in the talks, but there was just like less fear, I think, of starting the business at the beginning, because I don't know if I could have done that at 25 in Boston, where I'm from Massachusetts, and I think that would have just seemed really scary, and like, oh my God, I would have to have so much money to do it, and I would have to, be taken so seriously by everyone. And here it was just, I felt like there was less to lose. maybe there wasn't, but it just felt that way. It felt like, okay, well, if all of this, goes to shit, I can just go back there. I can go back and live with my parents. Like, there just seemed to be that safety net because I was so far away.
And no one would know. Right?
Yeah, no one would know. I think that's part of it, exactly. So it was like the secret life that happened for 2 years when she went to Europe, and and then you go back. But luckily that didn't happen, and this is now my home. But it wasn't as scary because you can just, I think, be that new person with a little less fear.
Yeah, actually something Cepee said in her talk is like, maybe some of those chances that you take here you would have never have taken in your home country. Like I asked myself, like, would I have started a company if I had been in the U.S. and like continued in my career path and got better paid corporate jobs, So I wonder, do you think being in Spain has had a big impact on your decision to become an entrepreneur in the first place, or being abroad?
I mean, definitely for me, I found when I came here, I was very unemployable. Like, if you don't speak Spanish, you don't want to work at like a big bank. It's not great. And I also think, like the startup environment, maybe because it's younger, I also find it a lot more international. There's not like, you have to eat at like 3 p.m. I can have lunch at noon if I want to. But it's how do you say, it's far more attractive. And actually someone in the audience I was talking to before this, like, this place doesn't look like Spain. And I actually thought that as well. It's like, if I had worked in like a larger company and not in like this kind of, let's say, a startup, it would have been a far, I think, less welcoming experience in Spain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I think obviously moving abroad, obviously, it's. I mean, I think one thing which was said before was that someone who moves abroad who does something different already is somewhat of an entrepreneur, and I think that opens a lot of doors. I mean, the fact that you decide to just move somewhere else and into a different country, different language, you might not know anyone there, and just kind of do things from, just kind of reinvent yourselves. I think that's, kind of makes things kind of happen more naturally, and you get a lot of foreign entrepreneurs in Spain, and I think that's it's basically because you come here and you're like, what do I do? I mean, you don't have a network, you don't have, you don't have a work permit. I mean, just things which kind of naturally, in my case, I mean, my problem wasn't being a foreigner, my problem was being a philosopher. I mean, it's like, I decided I had to start up a business because, God, what would I do with that? So, but yeah.
So did any of you have entrepreneurs in your family?
That just like was going through my mind when I was hearing these guys talk. I think in the past couple of years, it's really hit me that I think, and kind of going on what Shiva was talking about in her talk about the stories we tell ourselves and the stories that we know, and I think a lot of that is inherited by your family. And I would have never thought of it as one of the first things that came to mind of like how I started my business, but it is true that I come from a family of immigrants on my father's side from Italy, on my mother's side from Poland, and like many immigrants in the US, you had to figure it out, and that meant starting businesses a lot of the time. So yeah, I do have a lot of entrepreneurship. If I look back, small businesses, hard businesses, but yeah, and I think that is something that I think is in my DNA a little bit, and it's a nice thing to have there, but it's really interesting when you start to reflect on your family and the people who came before you, and I'm like reverse immigration type thing, coming here as an immigrant, and when they came there, and sometimes I'm like, oh, did I mess it up because, they came there for the better life and now I'm over here, but yeah, it's been really rewarding to think about how that connection runs through.
Yeah. And what about you guys, entrepreneurs in your family?
So I'm from Indonesia. Actually, my grandparents moved from China to Indonesia to find work. Mm-hmm. I actually find it really funny that I moved from New York to Madrid to find work. Like, I don't know, wrong move. But something that what you said kind of resonated with me in the sense that if you're if you're like surrounded by, or is not so uncomfortable, right, to take a risk or start something new, because you've seen it in your own culture, that is very helpful. However, I think you also have to understand kind of your own personality. Knowing now what I know about what it takes to start a company, I don't think I would ever do it again. Like I don't like the spotlight. It's a lot of shitty manual labor, and you know, and there's so much uncertainty. You also realize the economic upside is quite limited, you know. So I don't know. I think you really have to understand yourself and why you want to start a company, because otherwise it's really painful.
Yeah.
So the moral of the story is don't start a business. Yeah. In my case, actually, it's interesting because my father was basically always worked for basically for other companies all his life in a corporate job, and then when he was in his 50s, he got fired, and he started up his own business, and you know, basically he kind of since I was kind of out of college, kept insisting I should start up my business. He said I wasted 30 of my years of my life working for someone else, and because he really found out that he really enjoyed his own business. So yeah, I got pushed a lot, and then and then there's another thing I'm going to tell you, because basically obviously I guess like all Americans, were mainly, if you go just 2 generations behind, they're all immigrants. So in my case, I had my great-grandfather, he founded a company in New York, and he had moved from Poland, as a Polish Jewish immigrant, started up this company, and my grandparents took it over and made it big, and then basically my uncles took it over, and it went bankrupt. So basically, the moral of the story is I decided that I was going to sell my company before my kids or grandparents, bring it bankrupt. So it's just like, do your company, sell it, don't leave it to your kids or your grandparents. It's just not worth it. When I was a kid, I always thought I was going to be the next, the 4th generation of this, was Shore Incorporated. It just never happened. There's like an office, so it was like, go down, I was like, that's going to be my office.
But that influenced your decision to start your own business later? Like the fact that you're...
I was a philosopher. My my uncles have, basically brought the company bankrupt. I mean, I had to start my own business.
Clearly. Yeah. All right. Yeah, in my case, I actually didn't have any entrepreneurs really in my family. My aunt did have some kind of business, but I wasn't especially close to her. But that's why I found it really important to actually get to know other entrepreneurs and find mentors, because I think it's really hard to imagine what it takes to actually start a business if you haven't seen and really got to know someone who's done it. Yeah. So, but when you guys need to, who do you go to for business advice? Do you, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
I'm happy to jump in here. In 2017, our business was at a breaking point, I would say. Maybe not an absolute breaking point, but we had gotten to the size where we had a lot of staff and we did not have enough processes. And we were just going through one of the growing pains of a business at that size. And I think at that moment, very serendipitously, we met with a group of business consultants out of Chicago, and we've been using them ever since for help in growing the business. And before that, my thing was oh, well, you just figure it out, because that's what I'd always done. And it was that moment when I really realized the value of having people that knew what they were doing, helping you and advising you. And it was night and day. And in a matter of 6 months, we kind of turned things around and put in a lot of structure and processes and a lot of HR stuff, which is always at a certain size, I think one of the struggles businesses face. And since then have just been able to grow on our own, but with people behind us, helping us and steering us in the right direction. And like you said, Shaheen, as well, reading a lot of books really helps as well, because there's a lot of great advice out there. And so I think without that, who knows what would have happened, because there's definitely stresses when you hit certain sizes of the business that just every business I think goes through in their own way, but it's hard to get through if you don't have a good vision in mind.
So I realized never to go to my father, because I think the kind of business that he built up wasn't like your typical startup now. You know, he always asked me, so are you making money now? I'm like, no. It's like, so you need more money to make more money? I was like, yes. Like the idea of, I don't know, like a high growth startup that doesn't make money doesn't really make sense. To be honest, I turn a lot to like my co-founders. Even though I think it's very difficult for anyone outside to really understand the stresses and the challenges that you go to inside, except your fellow co-founders. And even though, for example, it's like the CTO or the kind of chief marketing person, areas that are not with me, but most of the challenges that I find are not like functional related, it's people related. You know, like my report hates me right now, or I cannot make this decision. And that one is like, you don't necessarily need to have a specific expertise in an area, but like kind of a general, business purpose knowledge. And so I definitely turn internally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in my case, I had co-founders, so obviously we used to, work a lot together, and we use each other as advice. In my case, also, my father was a big influence in me, and I could always pick up a call, and still do. And then sometimes my 12-year-old kids, they're very, very useful. You ask them something, you like bring up this really complicated problem, and they give you like these really, really crazy answers, and it makes you think. You're like, it does. It stimulates me. Sometimes it just makes me think. You just bring something up and someone says something like completely ridiculous, and you're like, God,
It makes you think.
It makes you think about it.
Yeah. I was wondering, how did you come up with the business idea for Antivenio? Like, that was your idea, that was your vision?
Yeah, I mean, it's for a place, it's like all businesses. I think the kind of when we finally sold the company, it had nothing to do with the business idea had to start, because been a lot of years have gone by and it evolved. But basically in my case, it was just basically I kind of moved into e-commerce initially because I had this tie shop. We were importing ties. I set up a shop, then I set up a shop online, and moved into e-commerce. And I had clients who were asking me to do ads for them, so I moved into advertising. So as I said, I would say in my case, sometimes I hear founders give these stories about how they come up with this idea. I have this problem, and I always wonder if it's true. I think half of, at least 80% of them they've invented, but they sound good. But or maybe it's not true. Maybe everyone had that experience, and mine was different. But mine was just things kind of happened.
You evolved to meet the market
needs. Yeah, kind of evolved
basically.
to the kind of opportunities which arised. And I kind of moved the business rather than really having a clear vision of where I wanted to go. Then, as the business grew, then, we started having strategy and thinking what I'm going to do the next 3 years. But I mean, at the start, there was never really much planning there.
Yeah, they say it's not about the idea, it's about the execution, right? So you were obviously executing well.
Or not necessarily. I mean, some cases yes, some not. But I mean, I was able to survive through it.
Yeah. Well, so are you guys keeping track of time? Should we go into the questions soon? Yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, any burning points any of you wanted to make before we go to the audience questions? Or about how you've had to change as a leader as your company has grown? I mean, all of you have companies that have expanded into multiple markets. You have big teams, lots of complexity in the businesses. I'm sure that didn't exist in the beginning. So how have you changed during the whole process of that? Or do you think you have? Maybe you haven't.
Well, one thing I became a mother after I founded the company, and that was, how do you say, it was either trying to figure out this work-life balance thing. It really doesn't work. the thing is, sometimes, at least like, for example, Madrid is not as expensive as like London or New York. So that helps a lot in terms of finding like affordable care. But that one for sure, it made me realize that, you know, you shouldn't probably try to coincide those two things at the same time. But now I realize that, how do you say, you are far more efficient with your time if you also have a family waiting for you at home. And I would never have identified myself as like mother first, you know, like worker, because I'm a workaholic. But it, I mean, that for me was a big shift in kind of priorities when I started my company.
I'll have to pick your brain because I just had twins 5 months ago, and it's like intense. But yeah, I can totally relate to that. That's been an interesting reinvention now, to reinvent yourself as a mother and an entrepreneur, and how those things coincide. But yeah, other than that, I think I change every few months because the business does grow so quickly, and so it changes so quickly, and the challenges are new. And I think, you know, we could have maintained a smaller business. We could have just stayed in Madrid, and I don't know that would have necessarily been a bad thing. But I think for me, and what's important to me personally and professionally, is that constant growth and that pushing yourself. And so that for me would have just been, you know, boring. I like it in a sick way when things are like on fire, because then you have to figure out how to put those fires out, or which ones, I think this has been a lesson in the past years, is like which fires to let keep burning for a little while. And so I really have like this addiction to that kind of juggling act, and so therefore I'm always changing and learning and trying to be, you know, better and learn more and be a better leader. I think leadership is one of the most challenging parts of this job, and something that I hope to continue to evolve for like the rest of my life.
Yeah, as I was saying, in my case, obviously, I would say the same situation. I mean, I changed. Obviously, I had to evolve a lot in the years, and you know, I obviously have changed a lot of things in myself. And I would say probably the kind of the worst thing, you know, I mean, kind of, you know, now I've been in business, you know, already decades at this point, and you know, there's a lot of talk about, you know, kind of entrepreneurs who are in their 40s or in their 50s, and how, you know, it used to be always young kids, and how some of the, let's say, more seasoned entrepreneurs do a very good job. But in my case, I actually kind of noticed kind of the opposite, in the sense that, to an extent, I think experience was good. I kind of had this feeling I was getting better, and now I feel like I'm getting worse. And the reason is very simple. I mean, it's not like I'm getting worse. It's just I've become, you know, I've seen so many things that I'm always calculating things. So I'm always looking at risks, and so I become a lot less natural, a lot less, willing to take risks. I always see, you know, I'm not going to do this because I'm going to get sued. I'm not going to, you know, because you've gone. Story, which say very briefly, but I mean, well, one of the startups I did, we basically had to fire 30 people at one moment. It was basically the whole team, and it was basically in 2000, and we had grown a lot. And in Spain, there was no way you could fire 30 people. You had to go through like an administrative, and it was called an ERE. And I basically said, I'm going to sit down with everyone and see if they're willing to, you know, basically leave the company. And, you know, and I did that, and I sat down with each and every person, and I negotiated a deal with basically 27 people, and 3 I had to fire. And it's something I would never do today. I mean, I would never think it was possible. You know, basically, I had never done it before, so I figured, yeah, you know, people will leave. I mean, I won't have to fire them. They're not going to be, you know, trying to get el paro and all these things. You know, I didn't think that people, you know, I was like, oh, these are my friends. They work with me. They're, you know, good guys.
But it sounded like it worked out well.
It worked out, but I mean, that's the thing. That's the thing.
Why wouldn't you do it today?
I would never do it today because I've seen, you know, after that, I've seen so many other things happening. I would say, there's no way I could do that. And that's you know, kind of the sad part of it, is you kind of feel like you get to a point where, you know.
Because you don't have that personal connection with the people anymore, is what you mean?
No. Well, that's also probably true. That's also probably true, because, you know, it was like a group of young kids, and I was one of them. But But I think the other thing is just basically I've you know, I'm not saying I've learned everything. I mean, I've learned a lot of things. I've gone through a lot of experiences which have made me, you know, a lot more mature as a manager. But I've, you know, basically become very risk adverse, and you know, and I hate it. Yeah.
I was also curious because you recently, when did you sell your company? That was
about 3 years ago, and then I had to, you know, stay. You know, typically you sell your company, you have to stay a while. So I stayed basically through about a year and a half ago.
Okay, and so now, like transitioning from being a CEO to what do you consider yourself now, and how is that like identity shift?
I'm advising. We have like a little boutique bank where we advise in M&A and funding and things like that. And you know, probably one of the reasons why I went to that because I've had a lot of experience, and I basically couldn't come up with a new idea. I couldn't come up with an idea because every idea I went through, you know, I was actually teaching entrepreneurship and you know, the IE, one of the executive masters. So you know, I went through all the process of coming up with the idea and validating it and all that, and I was like, none of the ideas seem viable. And I'm sure some of them must have been. It just, you know, I've become conservative.
I want to know, like, do you miss being a CEO, or you're happy with where you are now?
I'll tell you, come back a couple of years old.
Haven't decided yet.
No, now it's fun. Now it's fun. You know, new things tend to be fun. So I'm enjoying it.
Yeah. So, all right, we're going to go into the questions. I'm going to welcome Cepee and Shiva back up to the stage in case, and you guys can direct your questions at anybody, any of the speakers or panelists. Yes. Oh, we have this lovely throwable mic. So, who has a question?
That's great.
You have a question? Okay. Be careful. No, it's like soft and foamy. So, there you go. Well, all right.
Okay. First of all, thank you for this. It's been really helpful to listen to you guys. I have a question. I'm starting my own business. I'm 21 years old, so I'm pretty young, and I don't know how to come up with a good team. How do you build a team? How do you find the people that are, I guess, good for the business, or I don't know if that makes sense. Sorry, my English is not my first language. Sorry. So the question is, how do you came up with? How do you find the people?
Your co-founders or the first hires?
Yeah, co-founders or people that know the technology, or especially a startup, technology startup is pretty difficult to find people that actually know about the specialties.
Okay. I think that you have to be a really good influencer, and I do not mean anything about social media or Instagram when I say that. You have to be very confident, and you have to have the vision clear for what you're trying to attract people to, because age can be an advantage or a disadvantage or kind of a neutral. I think that's something actually that's interesting is now I work with a lot of people younger than me and in their early 20s, and I never really think much about it. But when I was in my early 20s, I had that kind of thing in my head that like, oh, no one's going to take me seriously. This is really embarrassing, but I would lie about my age sometimes when I was guiding the tours when I first started, because people would ask me and I'd be like, oh, they're not going to trust me if they know that I'm only, 20-something, or if they know that I haven't lived in Madrid that long. And it was so stupid to do that, but it was just insecurity. So I would say try to be really secure with yourself and don't let age affect you, and have clear what you're trying to attract people to come along to, because that's, I think, really important to someone who's about to take a risk and work with a new venture.
Yeah, I would chime in on that. Like, this actually reminds me of this story I told in my talk, which is about when I joined Spotahome and how basically, I mean, the founder, the CEO of Spotahome is Alejandro Artacho, and he's just great at convincing people at anything. And you could just see that he really believed in the business and that he had like the knowledge to like make it happen. So I think I've succeeded in doing that as well, to convince people to join my company, because I seem like I know what I'm doing, and I'm excited about what I'm doing, and it seems like a project that you really want to be part of. So yeah, that's my advice. show enthusiasm and try to pretend like you know what you're doing. So, yeah, any more questions? Yeah.
Thank you so much. It was amazing. So proud of all of you. I know, watched you along the way sometimes too. A couple of you mentioned using a business coach, and I had two questions around that. One is, how did you decide, first of all, that you were going to look for somebody? And then how did you choose your coach?
So I guess it's me and Lauren that I just, a friend recommended this coach, and I was just like, I talked to him like one day, and I was like, okay, I need help. You're here right now, and you seem like you know what you're doing, so cool. I didn't like do any analysis and compare different options. I don't know if that was the right thing to do, but it worked out for me. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of similar. Like, I was at a conference for food tourism, and they had a booth, and they specialized in tourism advising. So I set up a lot of the consultants will do like a free session, 1 hour, 2 hours, where they take apart your business, and it was impactful, that 2 hour session. So they did a really good job, and so yeah, just kind of jumped in without really doing any other research. But luckily it worked out. I think one thing though I have seen from when it doesn't work out with peers that I know is that like they say, hire slow, fire fast. Same goes for a business coach, because if it's not a good fit, it's a lot of money you're just kind of wasting. So yeah, try people out, get the free consults if you can, and find someone who fits with you. I think both on what your business goals are for the program, but also on a personal level, because you're going to spend a lot of time with them.
But also, like, I'm currently doing like a coaching program that's like based on a framework of a book that I read. So that's also, so this is a different coach than the one that I mentioned before. I think like you need different types of coaching at different stages of the business. And I think like when, and a lot of these books like are written by coaching companies. So if you really like kind of the style of the book, or there's a lot of content out there from coaching, from different coaches. So if their content speaks to you and you really like think that's the kind of coaching you need, that's one way. I mean, like, a lot of times the coaching company, they certify the coaches, so they're trained in this certain method. So if that's the kind of method you want to apply in your business, that could be a way to find them. I have a question back there. A couple of people.
Yeah.
Tina, you're closer.
Yeah, throw it halfway, and then throw it again. Woo.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to sit down again. So if you guys could do anything differently now that you've already gone through the entire roller coaster of building a startup that has transformed into a growth startup or company, what would you do differently now? Like, if you could start all over again, what would you do differently now?
I would have asked for help earlier, and if I were to start another startup, I would raise money at the beginning.
Thanks.
There you go.
I would get therapy.
Take what?
Because seriously, a lot of the times, the blocks that we have come from inside, not from outside. So I wish I started therapy just a couple years ago, and I wish I'd started therapy much sooner. And if not therapy, some type of coaching, at least, to have a mirror put up to me to see how I'm sabotaging myself.
Rika or Josh, do you have any?
Rika.
No? Sit out of that one.
Yeah, I mean,
Nothing you would have done differently?
No, I've done so many things I can't spend the next 15 minutes enumerating them all. But yeah, I mean, I guess there are a lot of things. I mean, you make so many mistakes, but I guess, it's if the company doesn't, go bankrupt or something, or you don't do something like really nasty to someone, or something you feel kind of morally, you've done wrong, it's just kind of part of the experience. I mean, you're kind of not born, especially if you haven't had a lot of previous experience, you kind of learn as you go, and all these things are useful. So it's, they talk about making mistakes is good, and I think it's true. I mean, it's good. it's good if you don't, if you make the same mistake 7 times, then it's stupid. But I mean, but if, you make a mistake, you learn from it, and it's all been, I think, all very positive for me.
I would try to enjoy the journey a whole lot more. I mean, even though On Truck is doing pretty well, there are so many ups and downs, like, 5 a.m. nights, just like, what are we gonna do tomorrow? And I think again, easier said now looking back, but still trying to celebrate like all the small things. Even you like made like one really good call today, you can celebrate that. Or you got like one compliment, just celebrate it, because you have to take everything and try to, be really positive. You will need it.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. So I have a very important question. All of you have built your own businesses, or you're startup owners or business owners, and something that I also struggle with is, what are your tips on disconnecting, relaxing? How do you relax? This is something that I also struggle with. I know many of you who know me, I also am involved with a lot of projects, so I would love to hear from fellow, overachievers and superstars, and what are your best tips for like disconnecting, relaxing, unwinding, and how do you focus on your kind of mental health and well-being throughout this whole process?
That's a really, really good question. I don't think I'm very good at it either.
So I'm also an overachiever, and I love to work, and I'm also, as many of us, involved in many projects. I think for me, I had to realize it comes in seasons, and hearing other people saying that and making it okay, that when there's times when I want to spend 6 months focusing on my work, and that's what I want to do, and I don't want to disconnect, and I don't want to have free time, that's okay, because that's how I operate. I think, I'm very new in my business, and I spent a lot of time in it, and I started to feel guilty when people would criticize me, or that's what it felt like, when they said, you need to work less, you need more time in your life. I mean, what are you doing working on a Friday? That's the weekend. And I truly enjoyed it and didn't feel that I was doing myself harm. And I think now I'm, coming into a season where I want to pull back a bit and make more space for myself. And I have to just be intentional about that, of, putting it on the calendar, signing up for things that I enjoy that don't have some kind of outcome that I can measure. And so just trying to stick to that for as long as it feels right, and know that there may be a season that's going to come up where I just want to work, and be okay with that, because that's who I am.
I remember, I don't know when, a few weeks ago or a few months ago before the holidays, one of my colleagues was asking me, where are you going to go for holiday? What are you going to do? And my partner jumped in right away, and he's like, Shiva doesn't understand holidays. She doesn't do that. That's not in her DNA. She doesn't get the concept. And I would go on holiday, and I would put these like out of office emails. I'm having a tech detox. Don't expect any messages. And then I would fucking immediately respond to every goddamn email that came my way. And what has helped me is, one, actually having a conversation with Cepee about, you know what, this is just how I operate, and I enjoy it, and that's okay. So stop judging myself, because the judging myself for working so much or too much was doing me more harm in some ways. That's on the one side. Now, on the other hand, I also trick myself in a way. So my current self knows that my future self would really love a holiday at some point. So my current self books holidays like 6 months in advance, which is not my personality. But I know that my future self will really be happy for this, and I will tell all of my colleagues, and I'll tell all of my business partners, I will not exist in 6 months' time from now. I will send them a calendar invite so that they know I will not exist on that time. And I've learned to say no. Very much learned to say no. So when that time comes, 6 months from now, when they ask me, can you take on this project, can you do this, whatever, no matter how good it is, I'll be like, well, as you know, because it's on your calendar, I'm not here at that time. However, we can work on it before or after. That's my little story.
I will add something. I think that it's really hard at the beginning if you're a solopreneur or if you have a small team, but I can't stress enough the importance of having processes, not for maybe if you want to disconnect or if you want to take that vacation, but if you have to. And I was very fortunate this year, after being in business since 2012, to have the team and the processes in place to be able to go on quite a long maternity leave, which started with being in the hospital for premature labor. And that was something that was completely unexpected. I had like 3 plans of like, oh, this is like the plan A, plan B, plan C. Well, plan D didn't exist, and that's what happened. And I don't think I could have dealt with that earlier on in the business. And so again, if I ever started another business, I would have from the start those plans that if you weren't able for whatever reason to work, this is what happens. And I think also having that allows you the breathing space to force sometimes you to take those moments to disconnect and to plan the vacation 6 months in advance, which is a great tip. And also to block things out, I think you mentioned, in your calendar, and to say, on Tuesday the 15th, on the morning, I am off because I'm going to do something else, and really block that time off. Those are all tips, I think, for disconnecting. And how you disconnect, Christina, I don't, everyone's different. Me personally, cooking, exercise, those are all things I enjoy, hiking, but yeah, it's hard to make time for that when you don't think about it in advance and you don't have the processes in place to be able to actually feel like you could turn your phone off for the day. It's really stressful. I think I lived for 8 years not being able to turn the phone off, and that was not healthy. So if I did it all again, I would try to fix that from the start.
I would just basically say that, when you start something, again, if you're on your own or just one partner, I think there are moments where you kind of just, it's very difficult to have any kind of balance and be able to kind of disconnect and everything. But, as businesses evolve, if it's dependent completely on you, then you actually have an issue. So something you should fix. And then, I think it's true. You can be okay with working 15 hours every day and weekends, which I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it if something you enjoy. But then, some cases you might have other people in your life. So in my case, I have a family. I got 4 kids. So they might not be okay with the fact that I'm not home. If I'm home, I'm working. So you basically have to figure out how to have that balance. If there's something you want to maintain, because a lot of families break up, and it's difficult enough having a family, but if you don't balance things, then the risk that you break up and you have a different situation, and might like it less than spending so many hours working. So it's good practice trying to after you get through this first phase where maybe you just don't have a choice. And in my case, you kind of negotiate it also in your family. Say, I'm doing something new. I'm going to be some time doing this, and it has to be understood. But at some point, business have to be able to, kind of go on their own. And if you got to leave a week, you can take a week off.
Yeah, I think it's when I was talking about focus before, I think that's like a big thing, a big lesson I've learned from a lot of different sources, but in this whole journey is it's not only about focusing on work, it's also focusing on all the areas of your life that need attention and not trying to multitask and mix things together. It's like, if this is my time off, I'm gonna focus on spending time with people I love, and that is my priority, and kind of separating that, and then when it is time to work, really focusing, and if that means you have to work 15 hours to meet a deadline or whatever, fine, that's the time you need to focus, but you can't just have this mess of too many things, because it can just be overwhelming. So, question over there.
We're good. Okay. So it came up really casually in the panel discussion, all you guys have, and girls, have companies that are active in different multiple markets, which is a big feat by itself. And Lauren indicated already that expansion is can be a big pain. To what degree do you feel like your backdrop of being a foreign entrepreneur here in Spain helped in making the decision to move into different markets, and to what degree do you feel like it gave maybe an advantage in the process of moving into different markets?
For us, from the beginning, me and my co-founder, we launched the business in Madrid. but we weren't from Madrid, and both of us had only lived in Madrid for a couple of years. And so when we started, seeing traction here and decided to expand to Barcelona as our next city, it was not, we didn't feel like, we actually didn't feel the imposter syndrome of like, oh, well, we're from Madrid and we know Madrid. How could we ever do this somewhere else? Which we think some of the competition possibly felt, and maybe was a reason they didn't expand. So for us, it was like, well, we know Madrid, and we've been able to do this really well in Madrid. Now we can repeat it in other cities. We know the model. So I think there was that. And I think that, yeah, there was just a little bit less fear to expand because of the fact that we were already like somewhere else.
I think it helped in two ways. One was like thinking international first. So like I said, at OnTruck, English was always our like first language, and that was actually a requirement for hiring, even though everyone was Spanish. So the mentality was there that, hey, we're Spain bred or born, but we want to be international. The second was actually funding, because the thing is, first of all, if you have networks outside of Spain, you can definitely leverage that. And it's not unusual to go to like London or Berlin and talk to investors. And in some ways, they kind of, at least my experience has been, they like diversity, international talent when they invest, money into a local company.
Okay, over there.
Oh, yep, okay, it's working, fantastic. First of all, thank you. And second of all, you guys talked about embarking on a journey of having your own business, and some of you guys worked in big corporations or for somebody else before you started this, or you just kind of jump into it straight away. I guess at what point did you feel like you were ready and you had enough knowledge and expertise to kind of leave that more secure job or stuff you had to really start your own stuff, or if you felt like you were ever ready to really just have your own business?
I would say I didn't. If I waited till I felt I was ready, I definitely would have never started a business. I don't know about you guys. Did you think you had the knowledge you needed to start the business when you started?
Well, in my case, I just kind of stumbled upon it. I don't know if anybody else did, but I think I always say start before you're ready. And so I stumbled upon it when I realized that it could be something. I did it without even knowing what I was doing, and I still am learning as I go. So I think definitely taking that leap and being okay with not knowing everything, right? And I think there's two ways you can do it. You can keep it as your side hustle while you keep your day job, and try to build it up to a place where you feel comfortable making that leap. That's probably the best way, I think, to do it, just so you have that safety net. But also, try to go all in your free time to try to build it up to something, and just learn as you go, and don't let not having knowledge stop you.
Yeah, I think every day there's things that I'm like, oh crap, I did not know that. I should know that. I'm a business owner.
I had no logical thought process when I left my job. I just realized I was miserable. I wasn't happy anymore. My body was telling me this can't continue. So the alarm went off, and my job was, no joke, a 5-minute walk from my apartment, and I would still be late every single day to work. Because I just didn't want to go. I just didn't want to be there, right? And that's when I realized at some point something's got to change, and I think it's the job that's got to change, because I can't keep this going anymore. And I don't think I'm still ready. I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. Not a fucking clue. I've decided I need to be a knower. Not a knower. I need to stop being a knower, and I need to start being a learner. So that's something that's helped me a lot, shifting from knower to learner. Just assuming I don't know shit, and I have to have help, and I need to ask those questions, and I will be the pain in the ass in board meetings saying, wait, what does that mean? You're using some jargon here. I have no idea what you're talking about. Can you unpack that, please? So I don't think I'm still ready. I've just learned to be okay with the fact that I will never be ready, and that mindset alone has helped me move forward.
I think the team, knowledge is not the limitation. My experience has been you need to find a good team to work with, because it can be a super lonely experience, and then you can always find complementary skills. And I think it's also knowing yourself, what you think you're good at and what you like to do. Obviously, you have to do a bunch of shit you don't want to do either. But ultimately, like, what is your role within the team that you really want to play in? Because it's hard to do it alone.
Joshua, any parting thoughts there? No.
Yeah, well,
Last chance.
Last chance. No, I don't know if the question was very much focused on the fact that you have a corporate job and you have to leave it now to start something. I don't know if that's the case. Is that the case, or?
I mean, yes, I have a corporate job, but I have a side hustle that I want to turn into, my main hustle. So
Yeah.
I guess more the question is focused on, like, at what point do you feel like you have enough knowledge and expertise? Because of course you're working to gain the experience to do things.
I mean, to an extent, I don't think. I mean, again, it's useful to have obviously experience. And I said, I think there's a point. Again, in my case, I'm saying I feel like I have too much. Again, maybe it's my personal case. So I mean, it's I don't think there's necessarily a moment. I mean, there's a moment in your life to do it, and it has to do also with a lot of personal situations. You're not happy with your job. I don't know. You divorced and you changed country. I mean, there can be millions of reasons to start something up, and you kind of just jump into it. I think no one really. I've taught it like entrepreneur masters, but I mean, it gives you some skills, but I mean, you're never ready to do that, and so there's a moment you have to feel comfortable to moving into that. And I think one of the main issues is the risk. Risk issue is, again, depending on your personal situation. Can you deal with it? Are you a single mother or father and you got 3 kids and everything depends on you? I mean, there are a lot of reasons why, even if you're ready, you wouldn't do it, or you wouldn't do it in that moment. But you just kind of have to feel that it's a time to do it, and you can assume the risk and the consequences if things don't work out, because there's obviously a huge chance they won't.
On that sad note.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to. I was not gonna speak.
But
all right, I think we've come to the end of our questions for this evening. So thank you everyone for asking questions. Before we wrap up for the night, there is going to be a chance for you to network back up at the top. So if you do have any more questions for any of the speakers and panelists, it's also a chance for you to go up and tell them how good they did this evening. If we see you leaving, then that's a sign that you didn't enjoy it. But I'm just putting that out there. No, I'm joking. I would like to close this by encouraging you to get onto your feet, to really acknowledge all of the people on this stage right now. So first of all, our speakers and our organizers for this evening, please stand up for Shiva, Cepee, and Shaheen. And my microphone is now working. And also continue that applause for our panelists as well. We have Lauren, Joshua, and Rika as well. Please stand up, guys. Stand up. Everyone stand up. Now, of course, without everybody here this evening, without our volunteers, without our sponsors as well that also were here this evening, we have Sterna Abogados, SiteGround, YangMag, Peninsula, and Refusion. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you feel really empowered and inspired by all the things you've heard this evening, and you are now motivated to either start your journey or continue your journey to become who you want to be as international entrepreneurs just like us. Thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful evening.